Okay. Today we want you to learn how to get the most money from Social Security. And there are some little known but potentially beneficial strategies. And we want to use those strategies to best protect your family financially moving forward. And we want to help you learn how to avoid some costly mistakes through Social Security. We're also going to talk about Social Security bankruptcy potential. But here we go.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and start off and just do a little bit of an overview, introduce some of the basics related to Social Security before we start to get into more of the details around specific scenarios that we want to take a look into. So when Social Security was initially developed, it was not intended to be this large part of your retirement income. Back then, pensions were a lot more prevalent. So it was just supposed to be a small supplement to your retirement nest egg. Since the inception of Social Security, however, you can see that there are fewer and fewer employers that have provided pensions, which has resulted in many people using Social Security as a large percentage of their retirement income. So given that, we'll go through and talk about a lot of the different factors that are going to impact what your benefit amount is. It's important that you work with an advisor that can help you make that best decision so that you're maximizing your Social Security benefit, given there are not these other avenues for retirement that we used to have back when it was first created. So there are a number of benefits of Social Security that we'll talk about today. And ultimately, the better you understand Social Security, the more likely you'll be able to use it as a valuable source of information. Most notably, the biggest one here is the lifetime income and longevity insurance, which is backed by the government. So it's one of the safest things that you can rely on. If the government fails, we have a lot more problems to worry about. As we mentioned, lifetime income. As we go, across the span of 20 years, you have this thing, inflation, that tends to erode some gains. However, with this, there's annual inflation adjustments. So a number of benefits of Social Security, and we'll get into these in more detail as we move through the discussion. So the first place you should go to check your Social Security is your Social Security statement. Now, on the statement, that's going to show you information such as different benefit estimates depending on when you start collecting, your earnings record, and the total tax that you've paid into the program. So, we're talking about the government here, so there's a lot of room for error. So it's important that you check your statement, take a look at that earnings record, and make sure that everything looks right. It's going to be a lot easier to make any adjustments before you start collecting rather than having to retroactively go back and try to make some adjustments. I would never want to have to deal with that, working with the government on that. With these statements, only individuals who are 60 and over, who are not currently receiving benefits and who don't have a Social Security account, are going to receive paper statements. However, if you don't fit that criteria, you can always visit their website, log into socialsecurity.gov, and take a look at your statement right through there at any moment. One of the most important things on your statement, and it's the first term that we're going to discuss, is known as your primary insurance amount, or PIA. And this is the monthly amount that you're eligible to start collecting at your full retirement age. Now, this doesn't mean that you should retire then. We'll go into this into more detail, but just wanted to introduce this term as it's going to be a very frequent occurrence in the rest of this presentation.
And we don't mean to offend anyone who is a federal employee when we say that maybe not the most accurate entity. They make a lot of mistakes. We're not referring to you.
Oh, no. I used to work for the government as well. It's just a very large organization. Law of large numbers. The more people you introduce, the higher room you have for error.
No offense, please.
Okay, so going back to your primary insurance amount. So this is the monthly benefit that you're eligible to collect at your full retirement age. It's determined by your 35 highest earning years. Now, if you don't have 35 years of earnings, it's going to replace any years with a zero. So if you have 30 years of earnings, there are going to be 5 years of zero earnings that are going to bring that amount down. So your yearly earnings are indexed for inflation. They come up to an average monthly amount, and that's applied to a formula to calculate your PIA. This next slide is going to show you the formula. We don't need to really worry about the numbers here and exactly what's going on. The key takeaway here is that the majority of the replacement of retirement income comes from that first $1,174 a month, which is only $14,000 a year. So if you're a low earner, you're still collecting 90% of that amount. As you can see, as you make more and more money, only 32% of that is going to be replaced in the Social Security formula, and then only 15% over $84,000 a year. So, for low earners versus high earners, there's not going to be as much of a disparity as you might think. A frequent question we'll get is, should you work an extra year? As I mentioned, you have to have the calculation is based off of 35 years of earnings. And there are a number of factors that you should take into account when deciding whether you should work an extra year. Now, if you had 35 years of earnings and they were all relatively consistent, and one additional year of earnings, you're going to make $5,000 more, it's not going to be as much of a difference on your benefit amount, rather than if you were to work an extra year to replace one of those 0 years that I had mentioned. And there's a calculator at this link. You can also go to their website where they'll have a link for it, and you can just use the calculator to figure out what an additional year of working would do to your benefit amount. A couple things of note, changes in 2024 that happened to Social Security. So the maximum primary insurance amount, again, that's the amount that's eligible for collection at full retirement age, is $3,822 a month, or $45,864 per year. You can collect more than this, as we'll see later on in the presentation, but that's that base amount at full retirement age. A couple other things of note: the maximum earnings on which you can be taxed is $168,600. You can see in 2008 that number was only $102,000. That is one of the ways that the government is trying to solve this issue around potential Social Security bankruptcy, which there are a lot of misconceptions, and we'll talk about that later on. So just a couple things that we wanted to point out. So full retirement age. Again, I mentioned that is when that's the age at which you're eligible to collect your primary insurance amount. And this is going to depend on the year with which you were born. So anyone born between the year 1943 and 1954, that full retirement age where you're eligible to collect is 66. For every year increase from then until 1960, you can see that's increased up by 2 months, all the way up to 67 for anyone born 1960 or later. And one thing that we want to clarify here, again, I mentioned that the full retirement age, that's just related to the primary insurance amount. That doesn't have anything to do with whether or not you should be retiring in that age. Although I guess I should say it does have something to do with it. It's a factor, but there are a lot of factors outside of just Social Security. So again, you should work with your advisor when making any major financial decisions.
Timing is everything when it comes to so many things, but certainly when it comes to Social Security and when you should apply for benefits. So Greg's been talking about FRA, full retirement age, being 67. We're going to go with that for most of the rest of the webinar, because you figure anyone born from 1960 on, it's going to apply to them, which is a significant number of the population. Now, FRA does not mean that you have to start collecting your benefit at age 67 or FRA. You can start collecting as early as age 62. But what's so crucial for you to know is that your benefit will be permanently reduced for each month before your FRA. So you can see if you start taking at age 62 and your full retirement age is 67, your benefit, that PIA, is going to be reduced to 70%. That is permanent. That is a lifelong decision you make. On the flip side, however, every year that you wait after your FRA to begin collecting Social Security, it goes up by 8%. And this is on a monthly basis, but it's prorated, but it's 8% per year. The latest you would want to start collecting is age 70. That's the maximum. And you'll see it's a difference of 124% of that PIA amount, which is very significant. And that too is permanent. If you file for Social Security and then change your mind, Greg had mentioned earlier if you made a mistake or if at age 70 or what have you. But this is if you file for Social Security benefit and then you change your mind, you can withdraw your application up to 12 months after the time you filed for benefits. But you have to repay anything that you received within that time period, as well as any benefits your child or your spouse received. But this is something you may want to consider. Maybe you file for it, decide 6 months later, I don't need this, or you have a windfall, you inherit, whatever it might be, and you decide, I don't want to collect yet. You repay everything. Social Security pretends like you never filed in the first place in that case, and your benefit can then grow like on those previous.
Yeah, so depending on the timing for anyone that is watching this that may have filed for Social Security early, is seeing this and thinking, oh man, I made a mistake here, does not mean that you're locked into that as long as you're within this 12-month window. So it's still worth the conversation if you have any questions.
Absolutely. So a nice advantage of Social Security retirement benefits are the typical cost of living adjustments, or COLAs. Those of you with the pension or so many other investment take things, you're familiar with COLAs. But a COLA is an annual inflation adjustment to your benefit amount, and it's based on the increase in the Consumer Price Index W, not the CPI that came out today, but the Consumer Price Index W. These annual adjustments are going to help you maintain the purchasing power of your benefits, keep up with the price of inflation of goods and services. The last few years, the cost of living increase, the COLA for Social Security has been pretty significant, but that's because we're trying to make up for the high inflation rate. Now, while all recipients of Social Security, they're going to receive the same annual COLA percent increase, it really makes an impact in the size of your benefit. So you can see here, if your FRA and was 67 and your primary insurance amount was $24,000 and you received a 2% COLA, that would have been $480. If, however, you had decided to collect your benefit early at age 62, remember you've got that 30% reduction. You're only receiving 70% of your benefit, or $16,800. 2% of that is only $336. If, on the other side, you had held off taking your benefit and your benefit is now at age 70, $29,760, you got that bump up of 124%, your 2% would be $595. Keep in mind, over the long term, that's really going to compound things. So at least you're going to have a COLA no matter where you stand, what age you take. Now, some of you might say, hey, okay, you said I could take at 62. I don't have to wait to FRA. Makes sense. I'm going to start at 62. I'm going to have 5 years of getting my benefit before I would have otherwise if I waited to 67. So, I must be better off. Well, not necessarily. And I want to take a look at that now and the cumulative benefits over time. So this is the same scenario. At age 67, full retirement age, and the PIA is $24,000, but someone decides to take early at 62, benefit $16,800, and then we'll take a look at the waiting till 70 as well. But what I want you to look at is the dotted lines. And the first dotted line at age 76 is when the total benefits for claiming at age 67 would surpass those at claiming at age 62. Where those two blue lines, the light blue and the darker blue, where they meet, that's showing that you would have been better off if you waited until age 67 to begin collecting your strategies, as long as you live to age 76. The next dotted lines show age 78. At age 78, the purple line crosses with that light blue line. So at age 78, you would have been better off, of course it is in hindsight, taking at 70 rather than taking at 62. And then that last line at age 80, the break even or the crossover point between age 67 and 70 is there. So in this scenario we're looking at, if you live to age 80, your best option for collecting Social Security would have been waiting until age 70. You can see at the very end, the right side, that purple line. If you had waited and you lived your full life expectancy to up to age 90, you would have received a lifetime benefit of $900,000 from Social Security versus only about $650 if you began collecting early. Of course, who knows how long you're going to live? That tends to be a problem. But if we look at the statistics, it helps. You can see that for years since 1960 in this graph here, you can see how drastically life expectancy has changed. The trajectory is just upward, kind of like we hope the stock market stays. Anyhow, females tend to live longer. Males, the light blue, don't tend to live quite as long. They are closing the gap, however, as we go to the right side of this graph. And by 2060, the life expectancy for the total population is projected to increase. And in 2060, it's going to be 85.6 for most people. But if longevity runs in your family, delaying your benefits really may make more sense because these numbers would really pertain to you. Despite all these numbers that I'm showing you, saying that the break even and all these different things and the lifetime benefits can be better if you wait, the majority of people do still file at 62. And then you can see the next group is at full retirement age, and only about 3% of people wait until age 70 to maximize their benefit. So here we have next few slides are a couple of little nuances or aspects of Social Security benefits. And the first is the earnings limit. And if you claim benefits prior to your full retirement age, this is the dark blue. So before you reach your FRA and you're still working, your benefits that you're collecting Social Security are going to be $1 of your benefits is going to be withheld. So it's going to be reduced by $1 for every $2 you earn above $22,320. So if you're making much money, chances are you're not going to want to collect full before your full retirement age. The year you reach your FRA, which is 66 and 10 months probably for most, or 67 now, that year that you're reaching that FRA, your benefits are reduced by $1 for every $3 in earnings. So they get a little more lenient, and that's above the threshold of $59,520. The month of your full retirement age and beyond, if you start collecting then, you can work as much as you want. There's no earnings limit, no withholding, no penalties there. Another aspect of Social Security benefits is the taxation, and actually is some preferential tax treatment that Social Security receives. On the left side, you can see your provisional income. What that consists of is your adjusted gross income, any tax-exempt interest, and half of your Social Security benefit. Add those all up, that's your provisional income. And that is what the taxation of your Social Security benefit is based on, your provisional income. If your provisional income falls below that first threshold of single less than 25,000, married filing jointly less than 32,000, your benefit is not taxed at all. Your Social Security is not taxed. Even though in that provisional income equation, it's listed, that doesn't mean you're being taxed on it. So if you fall under that threshold, none of your benefits taxed. If you go above that one threshold, between the 25 and 25,000, 34,000 for single, 32 to 44 for married filing jointly, your Social Security benefit will be taxable up to 50% of it. If you make 20,000, you're only taxed on 10,000 of it. And then above that top threshold, up to 85% of your Social Security benefit is taxable, above $34,000 provisional income for single, above 44 for married filing jointly. You're never taxed on 100% of your Social Security benefit. So it always receives some sort of preferential treatment, but it varies between 85%, 50%, or no taxes at all.
All right, now that we've walked you through some of the basics, given you a good overview, let's jump into a few scenarios and show how different factors such as whether you were married, if you were single, divorced, whether you had major health problems, how that's going to impact the decision you make when it comes to when you should claim Social Security. So this first case study, we have Mary, who's 62 years old, single and never married, and she's retired. So again, that work aspect that we talked about. So if you're working and collecting prior to full retirement age, that's going to reduce the amount that you're receiving. But she's retired, so we don't have to worry about that. And she's assumed to reach age 90 based on genetics, her family genetics, her current health, life expectancy charge. And if you remember from the break-even point, if you're going to live past 80, mathematically speaking, it makes most sense to wait until 70 to start collecting. So her primary insurance amount was $20,000. Now you can see here on this chart that she began collecting at 70. So she's seeing those 8% per year increases up to 24% increase at 70 with the cost of living adjustments. So the amount that she's going to receive that first year is going to be $29,500. And on this next slide, what you can see, this is something that you would see in goal planning and monitoring, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, but it's going to spit out the first year benefit as well as the total lifetime benefit for a couple different scenarios. Whether you start to take at retirement at 62, whether you wait until the Social Security designated full retirement age, or you wait until 70. So again, this is something that we can help walk you through and make the decision that's best for your situation.
Okay, now let's move on to Social Security for married couples. And this is where things get a little more complex, but the concepts are very extremely important for you to understand so you don't overlook any options that are available to you. So married individuals are eligible to claim spousal benefits, and those are benefits based on the other spouse's earning history. If they've been married for at least 1 year, they're at least 62 years old, and most importantly, if the spouse whose earning record is being collected on has started receiving their individual Social Security benefits. So you cannot start collecting a spousal benefit until that spouse also starts collecting or has already started collecting. And these spousal benefits are particularly valuable for couples if one spouse doesn't qualify for individual benefits, doesn't have those 40 quarters of earnings, or if they have a much lower PIA, less than 50% of the higher earners PIA. The maximum spousal benefit that can be received is 50% of the other spouse's PIA. And again, you're going to achieve that by waiting until full retirement age, FRA, to collect your spousal benefit. So if you look at this, these lines here, at full retirement at the bottom, you'll see you would receive 50% of your spouse's PIA. That's the max spousal benefit. If you come down to the left, however, that monthly amount decreases until you get to age 62. So if you start collecting a spousal benefit early, if your spouse is already collecting, remember, yours is going to be permanently reduced, and it would be reduced to 32.5%. Now, this is a lot lower because remember, we're starting at 50% benefit of the spouses versus if before, when we were saying if you take it 62, your benefit is reduced to 70% if you take early. That's if you're taking your full benefit. This is a 50% spousal benefit. So if you take early at 62, it's only going to be 32.5%. And again, that's permanent. So we want to be very careful in what we decide to do here. So here we have an example. This is a married couple. We've got Lisa, she's the lower earner, and we have Henry, he's the higher earner. Let's assume they're the same age. And his primary insurance amount, PIA, is $24,000 a year. So again, that's when he hits FRA, full retirement age. Lisa's is only $10,000 a year. It's much smaller. But Lisa wants to start collecting early. So she says, I'm going to start collecting my own individual benefit based on my own work record. But because I'm taking it early, my $10,000 is being reduced to 70% or $7,000. She's going to receive that for a number of years until Henry says at his FRA, I want to start collecting my benefit. And because he waited till FRA, he's going to receive his full benefit of $24,000. Lisa, however, had she waited until FRA, his FRA and hers, she would have received $12,000, half of his benefit. But because she collected early at age 62, her benefit is reduced. Remember that 32.5%. So her benefit is reduced to $9,000, but it is a spousal benefit. So she went from collecting her own at age 62, making $7,000, to bumping up to collecting a spousal benefit at full retirement age. And we will talk about this in a few minutes, but there's a survivor benefit for spouses. If Henry were to pass away, she would then bump up to a survivor benefit, which is the full amount that he was receiving, or $24,000. Again, we'll explain that in just a few minutes. So something that's important to keep in mind is when benefits mature. So starting at the bottom, the worker benefit. So if you're collecting on your own benefit, it no longer grows past age 70. You got that 8% bump up after full retirement age, went up, up, up. At 70, it's not going to grow anymore. The spousal benefit, which is the 50% benefit of the other spouses, does not grow past your full retirement age. So you don't want to wait until after your full retirement age if you're going to be collecting a spousal benefit. And then that surviving spouse benefit or divorced spouse surviving benefit, the same thing. It's not going to grow past full retirement age.
Well, let's take a look at a case study for a married couple. So here we have Rick and Katie, who are both married age 66. And the assumption here is that Katie lives to 90 and Rick lives to 87. Now, Rick's primary insurance amount is $30,000, Katie's is $0. So she doesn't have the appropriate work history to be able to collect her own benefit. Now, with Rick's mortality here at 87, it makes sense for him to wait until age 70 to start collecting. Now, since Katie is not able to collect her own work benefits since she doesn't have one, she's not able to collect any benefits except for the spousal benefit, and that's going to be when Rick starts to collect his. So at age 70, Katie can begin collecting 50% of the benefit, the spousal benefit. Now, if you look at this chart, you can see that Katie's benefit is not quite 50% of what Rick's receiving here. Now, that's because, as we mentioned earlier, the work benefits continue to grow until age 70, which Rick waited until. However, the spousal benefits, while she would have to wait until 70, they stop growing at that full retirement age of 67, which is why it's slightly below 50%. Now let's add another detail here. Same situation, but this time Katie does have a work history, and her PIA is only $10,000. It's significantly lower than Rick's. In this case, so they have the same mortality rates or expected mortality. So they're still going to make the same decisions. Rick's going to wait until 70. However, because Katie does have a work record, she is able to start claiming her work benefits prior to collecting the spousal benefits. So the best case scenario for her here is to start collecting her work benefits. And then when Rick files for his work benefits at age 70, Katie's able to refile for spousal benefits, which is going to increase the amount she's receiving, as you can see here, under 2027. Now, again, as we mentioned, the Social Security Administration is not going to proactively reach out to you. It's just like filing your taxes. They're not going to make sure you do it, and they're not going to make sure that you optimize your return. So it's important that you stay on top of these things, and that's something that an advisor can be really helpful for, to make sure that events like this are taking place.
Yeah, and you do actually have to contact the Social Security Administration to get these things done.
Okay, let's look at another married couple. So here we have a gap in the primary insurance amount, but we're going to add an age gap. So we have Fred and Wilma, who are married. Fred's 62, Wilma's 52. They're both working. Fred is expected to live to 87 and Wilma to 90. So in this case, the man has a higher work record than his wife. Fred should consider waiting to file until 70. Again, with his life expectancy at 87, that's when he's going to maximize his benefit. And in this case, Wilma should consider filing as early as possible at 62. Now, You might be looking at her expected age of 90 and thinking, well, I saw the break-even ages. Why wouldn't she wait until 70? Now, because of the gap in their primary insurance amounts and their ages here, it's likely that, based on statistics alone, that Fred is likely going to pass away before Katie reaches that break-even age. And at that point in time, she would be able to switch over to 100% of his benefit, which would be greater than the 24% increase she would see for her situation. So a couple things just to note to summarize that when we're talking about spouses and whether or not you should maximize the higher earner, the lower earner, when to delay, it tends to make sense to delay the higher earner's benefit as long as one spouse is alive at the break-even age. Now, if both spouses are likely to reach their break-even point, in that case, it would most likely make sense to delay the lower earner's benefit. And of course, there are just a few different considerations for the strategy you take for married couples. Whether or not you delay the higher earner's benefit, the lower earner's benefit, whether you maximize the higher earner's benefit, or you account for the probability that they won't both live a long life. Again, just a lot of factors that we can throw into our calculator and analysis and can help you make the best decision for your situation. So here we have another scenario. We've got Ralph and Mary who are married. Ralph's 80, Mary is 65. They're both retired, and they're assumed to live to 90. Now, Ralph's primary insurance amount is 25. Mary's is just 15, but she hasn't filed yet, and she's 65. So we talked about this earlier about the best strategies that you should take. Given that she hasn't filed yet, it would make sense for her to consider filing right now. This is just a little chart that shows the amount they would earn per year. And if we go to the next slide, you can see again, this is something we would see within GPM that's going to show the different scenarios. Ralph beginning at 70, Mary at full retirement age, the strategy under this scenario for collecting immediately. And it shows the first year benefit and total lifetime benefit. You can see in a couple of these scenarios, the dollar amount is somewhat similar. So this calculator can help make sense of the numbers when there are a lot of different factors at play. Another occurrence that happens fairly frequently is an error in the filing timing. So here we see Belinda and Sarah, who are married. They're both 75. Belinda has a much higher work record than Sarah, so her primary insurance amount is going to be a higher number. Sarah filed at 62 and Belinda filed at 66. You can see that difference. There's a $21,000 gap between their benefits. So when Sarah filed at 62, she wasn't yet eligible for the spousal benefits because Belinda hadn't started collecting hers yet. Now, what she should have done is she should have switched over once Belinda started collecting, because 50% of Belinda's benefit at $27,000 is going to be greater than the $6,000 that she received. Granted, that's going to be reduced a little bit because Sarah started collecting at 62, but even still, it would have made more sense for her to switch over. She failed to file for the spousal benefits. Therefore, she's still receiving that smaller benefit amount. And again, this is just something that you need to stay on top of. The Social Security Administration is not going to proactively reach out or help you determine the best strategy. Kind of along these same lines here is what's known as a 6-month retroactive check. And there are two nuances here we want to point out. So the first one here. So let's say you wanted to file at 70 and you forgot to do so for 6 months. So you missed out on those 6 months of payments. So the Social Security Administration will pay you back for up to 6 months of those lost benefits. Now, there's another scenario that we'll see every now and then where you want to file at 70, you're not late, you're coming there trying to file, and they'll offer you a check for the last 6 months in a lump sum payment, which sounds really attractive. Why would I turn that down? What they don't let you know is that they're reducing your lifetime benefits by 4%, because what they're saying is, we're going to give you 6 months of benefit, but we're going to consider the age that you started collecting 69 and a half.
Okay, now we're going to move on to divorced spouses. We already talked about spouses, but this is an aspect of Social Security that often surprises people, that there's this divorce spouse benefit, and you're eligible for that if your marriage lasted at least 10 years, you're currently unmarried, unless you're married to somebody who's receiving widower benefits. That's one little caveat. You've been divorced for at least 2 years, unless your ex-spouse has already filed for benefits at the time of your divorce while you were still married. The crazy thing is there is no impact on the spouse that you're filing off of at all. They don't even know about it. You have to request this from the Social Security Administration. They're not going to offer this benefit to you. You have to go in and you'll file based on your ex-spouse's work record. And crazy, doesn't matter how many times you've been married. If you've been married 3 times, each marriage lasted at least 10 years, you end up being divorced when you're, looking at Social Security and what you want to do for collection. You could choose which of those ex-spouses you wanted to collect from or off of, because again, it doesn't impact them at all. So you could say, well, oh, my best benefit would be from my second spouse. You could collect from them. Yeah, it seems a little bit crazy, and one thing that makes it even better than the normal spousal benefit, in order for you to start collecting your benefit, the ex-spouse does not have to be collecting his or hers first. If you're married and you're looking for a spousal benefit, the one you're collecting based on has to start taking their benefit already, not when it's an ex-spouse. Doesn't matter what they're doing. You're kind of on your own. And similar to the spousal benefit, the divorce spousal benefit is equal to 50% of the former spouse's full retirement.
So let's look at a case study for a divorced couple. So here we're looking at Rose and Bob, who were married for 15 years, and unfortunately divorced 10 years ago, and they're both currently 62 years old. Rose has a better work record than Bob, and Bob's currently single looking to file. However, so while Rose's work record is greater than Bob's, Bob's work benefit is more than 50% of what Rose's would have been. So we talked about the spousal benefit being 50%. So Bob's unfortunately ineligible to file for the spousal benefit. However, if Rose dies, Bob can file for a survivor benefit, which we'll touch on in the next couple slides, on her work record, which may be greater than his individual work record.
Now we're jumping into those surviving spouse benefits. So they're so extremely valuable if the lower earning spouse outlives the higher earning spouse. Imagine the predicament that surviving spouse would be in when all of that income goes away. A surviving spouse can receive survivor benefits as early as age 60 or earlier if they're disabled or caring for a child under age 16. Full survivor benefits, which I mentioned slides ago, are available at full retirement age, and they won't go up beyond your full retirement age. And they're equal to either 100% of the benefit of a deceased spouse, what the deceased spouse was receiving, or the benefit they would have qualified for at the time of their death. If survivor benefits are claimed prior to a surviving spouse's full retirement age, monthly reduction applies. So at age 70, you can claim a minimum amount of 71.5% of a deceased spouse's benefit. That is if the full retirement age for that deceased spouse was 66. Should a surviving spouse end up getting remarried, Social Security benefit may terminate, but the benefit of the eligible child won't. And then if a surviving spouse is eligible for their own benefits, you might be able to, or they might be able to claim survivor benefits and then let the individual benefit grow until age 70, or do the opposite. Claim individual benefits early and then claim their full survivor benefit at full retirement age. Turn it on then. This is a question. They say this is a common question. I don't know how common it is, but it's basically, my grandmother-in-law or somebody passed away. They were older. She'd only been receiving benefits on her work history, which was very small, instead of her ex-husband's. And she was married for many years. She should have turned it on switched over to a spousal benefit years ago. She's dead now. He's dead. Can I go back and can we recoup any of that money? No. Once it's gone, it's gone. If somebody passes away, such like that, and didn't receive their benefit, there are no beneficiaries, like a 401k or some other type of account might have. There are no, it's just gone. Again, survivor benefits can, a couple of different strategies. You begin survivor benefits as early as age 60, let your own work benefit grow until you're 70, and then switch to maximize your work benefit. Or do the opposite. Strategy number 2 is you begin your work benefit early. So you start collecting early at age 62, let that survivor benefit grow until 66 or 77, whichever your full retirement age is. Remember, survivor benefit won't grow beyond that. And then you switch to that maximized survivor benefit, but you always have to be mindful of the earned income test.
Let's look at both of those scenarios. First one, we'll start with that case, or the first situation that Deb just described. So we have Emily, who's currently 60 years old. She's retired and has a good work record. So given that she's retired, she doesn't have that earned income test. If she starts collecting, she's not going to take any hit on the amount that she receives. And her husband has recently died. So what she can do here, Emily can start to claim her survivor benefit now. It will be reduced for taking it before her full retirement age. However, that's more than offset because it allows her to collect some money while her good work record, that greater amount in the primary insurance amount that she receives, that's going to be appreciating until she hits 70. So at that point in time, she can then switch to her fully maximized work benefit, which is the most optimal case for her. Now here we're looking at Jane, who's 64. Her husband died when she was 60. She was told to wait until 67 to turn on the survivor benefits, since that's when they would reach the full amount. However, she did not tell this. So if she were planning on taking the survivor benefits at 67, she could have been taking her smaller amount of the work benefit that she has. And she did not tell the Social Security Administration to turn those on at 62. So in this case, she missed out on 2 years of benefits, where she would have been able to collect from 62 to 67 and then switch over to those survivor benefits that we had talked about. So here we're looking at an example of a mistake with a survivor benefit. So we have Ben here, who's 72. His spouse died when they were 66. At that time, his spouse had already filed for benefits, but Ben had not. At the time of his spouse's death, their benefit, you can see the difference, was $26,000 against Ben's, which is $24,000. And Ben decided to turn on his survivor benefits at 66. So by the time that he turned 70, his own benefits exceeded that survivor benefit amount. However, in this case, he forgot to tell the Social Security Administration, or he just neglected to tell them to switch over. And every month that he is continuing to collect under the current strategy and doesn't switch over, he's going to be losing money. They're not going to retroactively make those changes more after a certain time frame. So again, we've talked about so many different factors that come into play. It's hard to keep track of it. It's just important to stay on top of it to make sure that you're making the most out of your retirement. And then just a couple factors to take into account with benefit planning for survivors. So if the surviving spouse waits until full retirement age or later to file, the surviving spouse is going to receive 100% of what the decedent spouse was receiving or was due to receive if they hadn't filed yet. Now, if the spouse dies before they started collecting Social Security, but it was before their full retirement age, the surviving spouse is going to receive the full primary insurance amount only if they wait until their own full retirement age. So that age gap between the two are going to come into play there. And then finally, if the spouse dies after they started taking or collecting Social Security, and it's before their full retirement age, that surviving spouse will receive what the decedent spouse was receiving, or 82.5% of their full amount, whichever one is greater. And we're going to demonstrate that last point here. So Jennifer and John are married. They're both 62. Jennifer's primary insurance amount is $30,000 a year. John's is $10,000 per year. Jennifer was unfortunately just diagnosed with cancer and is expected to live only 6 months. Situations like these, I'm sure we've all run into them in one way or another from somebody we know. And as unfortunate as they are, it's still important that you're making the decision that's best for your family, especially when you're going to have a widow at play here. So Jennifer, given that she's only 62, she's only going to receive 70% of that 30,000 PIA, which is 21,000 a year until her death. And given what we had shown on the previous slide, the amount that John's widower benefit is going to be capped at, given that she started collecting, is only going to be 24,750, because again, it's only going to be 82.5% of that minimum, or what she was collecting. Now, if she had not started to collect those benefits, given it was only 6 months life expectancy, and John started to file after the fact, after her passing, his widower benefit would then be the full $30,000. That brings us to our last major topic here, Social Security bankruptcy, which is one of the biggest topics that comes up when we're talking about Social Security. So one of the major problems at play here is we have far fewer workers per beneficiary for Social Security, which means there's a lot less money going into the fund. And looking ahead, by 2090, we're expecting only about 2 workers per beneficiary. Now, based on a 2021 Board of Trustees report, the trust fund is scheduled to run out of money in 2034, which is 10 years from now. Now, an important distinction here and a common misconception is that doesn't mean Social Security is going to be eliminated. Approximately, as you can see, 79% of the benefits are coming from taxes. So going bankrupt doesn't mean that your benefits are going to go to zero. So that's an important distinction that we want to remind everybody as we're making these decisions. So will your benefits be cut in 14 years? Proposals put forth don't suggest cutting benefits for those who are 55 or older. In fact, Biden has proposed raising the payroll tax percentage from the current 6.2% and gradually raising it a couple percent to increase solvency by 75 years. Now, whether you think that's a good or bad thing, it depends on your personal situation. A couple other options include raising the limit. So we talked about $168,000 of earned income that is taxed for Social Security. They can raise that limit, which would increase that pool for Social Security. They could raise the full retirement age, which is currently 67. Earlier in the presentation, we showed how those ages have changed over the years. And what that would essentially do is reduce the amount that you can collect if you start taking early, or it prevents you from taking it too early. Again, we're seeing these longer life expectancies, and it's somewhat unsustainable to have 30, sometimes even 40 years, depending on who it is, collecting Social Security. You can lower the cost of living adjustments, and then finally cutting benefits, the least likely option and the least attractive.
That's for sure.
So sort of to wrap up with the bankruptcy discussion, essentially the government has always been able to increase payroll taxes or the wage base to expand the program. And what we want you to take away is that your claiming decisions shouldn't really be impacted by this trust fund bankruptcy, as we should call it, to clarify that misconception. And even if the benefits were to be cut, which is unlikely, it still is not going to change whether or not you should make the decision to collect early or defer until a later date. That calculation is still going to be the similar end goal there. So again, try not to let these scary bankruptcy concerns impact the decisions that you're making for your family. Again, we're always here to help if you have any questions.
Yep. So we're just going to finish up, summarize. As you can tell, Social Security is an important component of a retirement income plan, even more so now that most pensions have gone by the wayside, or they are, certainly in the future. And it's complex, and the Social Security Administration is not going to help you make the right decision. So you've got to remember to work with the financial advisor to make the calls to the Social Security Administration when necessary, because not doing so, making mistakes can be costly. You can lose benefits forever. They are permanent. And we strongly recommend that you, again, talk to one of us and undergo a personalized benefits analysis. So I mentioned that we have goal planning and monitoring. And in goal planning and monitoring, we have an area specifically geared towards Social Security. And we can run these various scenarios for you, find the break-even point, find out what the maximum benefit would be, assuming full life for you, your spouse, your ex-spouse, whatever it might be. And we're happy to do that for you. Just let us know. Many of we've already done that with, but we're always willing to. And if you have a friend or anybody who is in this predicament, a child, a parent, not sure what to do for Social Security wise, reach out to me, and I'm happy to, do a Social Security strategization call with them, run the numbers for them. Always happy to do that. We are going to have this available for replay, so we can certainly do that. Sorry, we have a couple of questions.
So I saw the first one for, if you turn 65 and you haven't registered with Social Security, the penalty is actually related to Medicare. Yeah, not for Social Security.
And that would be permanent. That is, if you're going to need the Medicare Part B at some point, you should file. And that's why we have Clear Match. It's the service that we have that will talk to you about Medicare, because that is even more complicated than Social Security. But we want to make sure that you're not going to have a penalty. And the penalty is, once you do file for Medicare, you're going to have that penalty. It's a permanent increase in your cost. So you want to try to avoid that as much as possible. And if my spouse dies before he has filed for Social Security, as a spouse, can I collect the spousal benefit? Yes, you can. If your spouse dies before Social Security, you're going to be eligible for his PIA or her PIA, that Social Security amount at their whatever it would be, full retirement. That's if you wait until your full retirement age. So for most of us, that's going to be 67. If you wait to collect it, you're going to receive the full surviving spouse benefit of your spouse that passed away, their PIA. If you take it earlier, it's going to be permanently reduced accordingly. You wouldn't want to wait if your spouse passes away before you reach full retirement age. You wouldn't want to wait until after your full retirement age to collect, because you'll never receive more than their PIA unless they had been holding off and had they had pushed theirs, kicked theirs down the road as well. So complicated. Happy to go through it with you though at any time. So again, if you have any questions, I think all of you have my email address. The number here at the office is 301-595-8600. Feel free to give us a call, shoot us an email. We're happy to do so. And again, we will have the replay available to you shortly. And take care. Hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Have a good one, everybody.
We'll talk soon. Bye.
All right. It's good timing. 4:59.